I
Dana.
think that just leaves
And,
me. Yeah.
and
So
Dana.
I'm an agency recruiter and an account manager, and helping out with Incredihire. I've been in the business for about 7 years now, and have definitely seen some really great interviews and resumes and candidates, and have seen some opportunities for growth. But excited to be here, and I'll be moderating. And yeah, let's kick it off.
Awesome.
Well, Eugene, let's start with you. Let's do a fun one for everybody here. Myth or fact? Keep your resume to one page. Give us your opinions.
It's actually interesting. Like speaking as a hiring manager, I have a sort of an apocryphal view in that I don't really care about resumes that much. And the reason for that is, as a hiring manager, the thing that I really care about is what I call signal amplitude, right? Which basically means the amount of information that I can glean from the candidate that is unforced, right? So, in other words, a resume is something that a candidate can work on for months at a time, can hire coaches to create, right? To wordsmith, to fix every comma, every white space, and make it absolutely perfect. And as such, other than basic factual information, like the first couple of jobs that they've or the last couple of jobs that they've had, right? How many years, maybe it doesn't tell me all that much about them, right? And so what I tend to do when I get resumes and I'll skim them, and from that perspective, if it's interesting, like I don't care if it's 1 page or 2 pages or 15 pages, if there is interesting stuff to read. So I'll skim them mostly to kind of scan for things that might spark my interest. For example, there are certain technologies that I'm a huge fan of, and if I find them on a resume, I will be sure to talk about them in an interview. For example, I had a case once where like a guy put reactive extensions on his technologies list. And I'm like, oh, let's talk about RX. Like that sounds like a lot of fun. And we proceeded to have a really good conversation. So that can be sort of an unexpected boon. But other than that, for me, resumes are, just something I have to quickly glance at before the interview.
React extensions. What are some other technologies that would pop out to you?
These days, like fast API, I'd be curious to, chat about that and the person's experience. Obviously, like cloud tech, like AWS, things like that, and their experience with that. Like that's something that I would be interested to talk about. Mostly what I'm looking for in those conversations, though, is not necessarily like huge technical depth and being able to explain the technology end to end. I want to see the person's eyes light up, right? I'm looking for passion.
Mm.
So when I'm asking the person about RX and they go, yeah, I used this thing once, it was, yeah, whatever. That's not gonna, that doesn't impress me. But if they go like me, they go, oh, that was really cool. It's a totally different programming paradigm. Like I had a lot of fun getting my mind around how to use it right? That's going to be a productive discussion. That's high signal amplitude.
So it matters to put the fun things you're working on your resume. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Things that you're passionate about, things that when you're asked about, like your eyes will light up. That generates a lot of positive energy in an interview, and that energy translates, like it flows to the interviewer, right? And it gets them more predisposed to say, oh, this is the kind of person I want to work with.
Yeah, love that. George, what are your thoughts on the length of a resume?
Yeah, I would say in resumes, as in life, size doesn't matter. It's the motion in your ocean that matters more. So uh, I've seen a lot of really long resumes that really don't say much. It almost sounds like you're overcompensating when you try to put too much in there. I look for impact. So in the first page, you should impress me. I want to see your biggest accomplishments and metrics of how you measure those accomplishments. So I look for numbers. I look for, I increased this thing by X% in this much time. Cool, that's interesting. I want to talk about it. I want to hear about it. So I think that's the biggest gripe I have with resumes. A lot of them just look like a template. They look like any other resume. They list technologies that they've used, and it really doesn't tell me about who the person really is and what they've done. So Sure, if you have a long career, I'd expect a couple pages, 3 pages maybe. I'm probably not going to get to the third page. You need to impress me in the first page, or I'm going to be lost.
Yeah, absolutely. I always recommend all I really care to see is the last 3 to 5 years. And if it goes on longer than 10 years, which I know we all have more than 10 years of experience, but keep that minimal because it really just matters what you've done in the last 3 to 5 years. Actually, I think George, you had mentioned at the top of the page, or maybe that was you, Ken. How can you how can you put that on your resume that what impact you've had?
Yeah, I actually use like a summary line or a highlights line at the top, which is a sentence or two, and you get very specific. You say, I help to drive this much in revenue, and through this, I help to actually bring in this many more customers. Just very brief, concise statements that talk specifically about the impact. And if there's curiosity about any of those, well, the whole resume is right there below, and they can dig it up if they wish. But the point is I've taken those things that are factors that make me different from everybody else and put them right up at top. You have 5 to 7 seconds at best with most people who are going to look at a resume, not even counting ATS systems. In 5 to 7 seconds, if you give them a sentence to read that blows their mind, okay, they're going to remember that. That actually might get you somewhere. If it's going to be the full professional, experience, the summary, I want to be this, uh, it's just going to be skim, 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 skim. I didn't see anything. They'll never get to page 2. They're just going to go through and see very little that actually stands out.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Great tips. Well, for the folks that are here today, I certainly know it's been an incredibly challenging market. Lots of talented engineers are looking for work right now. That lots of layoffs happening. There is stuff to do to get back into the market. Kelly, would love to kind of address that. George, kind of one of our questions is, what advice would you give to software engineers or folks who feel like they're stuck in their current role or trying to get back into the market? Like, where do they even start first?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. The market is tough right now because there's so many people applying for the same jobs, and it's tough on both sides. It's tough for candidates who are applying because there's so much competition, and it's tough for hiring managers because, I was talking with a friend who's a CEO of a startup, and he was saying he opened a job post, and in about 3 or 4 days, he got 700 applicants. He had to close it because, he said, how am I going to get through 700 resumes? And he has to use some system to filter some out, and then he's just going to go probably in, order of whoever applied first. And so if you're not in the top 2 or 300, your resume not even ever gets seen. Um, and that's tough, right? So unless you're refreshing and applying to every job possible, you might not even get noticed. So I'd say 2 things. It's what you know and who you know. So the what you need to build experience. Like we were talking about resumes, sure, there's some keywords on there that might get noticed and picked up. But then when a human looks at it, when a hiring manager or recruiter looks at it, you need to show, demonstrable impact. And that only comes with experience. Coding boot camps won't make you a hireable developer. Real projects will. Um, and I mean, Incredihire, that's what we do. We bring people on, you work on a real project, on a real product with a team, and you ship a feature. So it's much different than doing your own project on the side. I'd suggest that too, if that's something you're interested in. But there's nothing like working with people. It just adds a layer of complexity that is very real world. And it's hard to get that on your own or even in a boot camp or a class. So that experience, if you don't have that professional experience, gain it in any way you can. And real world is the best. The other thing is who you know. So really networking is key. We've said this, we've heard it over and over again. But it's even more important now because it's so hard to get noticed. And again, if a hiring manager has a stack of resumes, sure, they'll eventually get through them. But you know who they're going to prioritize talking to first is referrals, people who've reached out directly. And I mean, it's hard to get noticed now if you don't do that. And I'll give you a couple tips. One is reach out to people who you don't know and ask for referrals. So I actually got a job doing this. I was applying for a job. I knew I wasn't in the top like 100 applicants. And I reached out to someone I didn't know on LinkedIn, really brief message, say, hi, you don't know me. Can I ask you for a favor? I think I'm a great fit for this job. Can you refer me? And the person responded. They said, sure. One thing led to another. I got the job. They got a referral bonus. And I talked to the person after I got hired, and it was great. So you never know what would happen. Worst case, you get ignored. You send another message to someone else. The other thing is reach out to other people, especially in more senior positions. I think a lot of us are intimidated to do that. We think, VPs, directors are super busy, and they are. But a lot of people also want to give back once they get to a certain point in their career. There's like 3 stages of career. There's the learning, earning, and then returning. And so that's something I like to do. When people reach out to me, if I can help them, I will. And it won't hurt to reach out to someone who's, a position that you want to get to eventually and say, hi, can I buy you a cup of coffee? I'd love to learn more about your career. Or can I get 15 minutes of your time and just chat? I'm really interested in your company. You'd be surprised how many actually respond. And do your due diligence, learn about them, be ready, ask thoughtful questions. And just that networking is great. But the knowledge you get, the relationship that you build with that person is great. And if they're not hiring now, they might be hiring later, and they might have friends who are hiring. So that's been something that's been great for me personally, having those kind of mentors, people who I've reached out to. It's just a great way to connect.
Yeah, I love that. Networking, asking for help, but also just keeping it authentic, don't just stick with one person. And how many people did you say you reached out to during your process?
Well, the place where I got hired, it was only that one person. They responded right away, and it worked out really well. There's another company where I think I sent 10 messages. No one responded. It was one that I really wanted, but I never got a response back. Other companies, I got 1 or 2 responses, but it just wasn't a great fit. So it really depends, and you never know. It really doesn't hurt. It's takes a few seconds. I think it's a valuable thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Eugene, this kind of ties into your area of expertise and directly answering, David's question about just having a hard time getting response to applications. So what are your tips for like, how can SDEs or even staff level software engineers get noticed in the job market today?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of things. They come down ultimately to networking, which is exactly the thing that George was mentioning. There are a couple techniques that you might want to use for that. One is your LinkedIn needs to be stellar, right? So it needs to be like clean header. Like there are a lot of guidelines for how to make your LinkedIn look good. Do that, right? Needs to have a very clear call to action button. Needs to have all your job. Like basically, it's as important, if not more important, than your resume, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is consider returning. To use that stage from George's 3 stages. Consider returning early, especially if you're in a stage where you're a senior or a staff level engineer. Start writing content for LinkedIn, for blogs, for Medium, etc., about your field of expertise. What it does is it starts building you followers, and it starts like among those followers can be people who are hiring managers and who are hiring and who are going to be impressed with what you have to say, right? So that's a pretty powerful technique. The other technique that I would really recommend is contribute to open source.
Hmm.
So find an open source project that involves the technologies that you are experienced with, or if you want to learn a new technology, find one that you're not experienced with, right? But highly start project with hopefully a lot of contributors, right? So don't pick ones with just one or two contributors. Pick ones with like 40 or 50, right? And start contributing to that substantively. What that does is like those 40 or 50 contributors, a lot of them have day jobs. And a lot of them have contacts within the companies that they're working in, right? And those companies might be hiring. And when you start making friends or start getting known amongst that contributor community, they know exactly what you can do. They become your best advocates, right? They can speak for the kind of work that you've done on their open source project and your capabilities. So that's another thing to really consider. And finally, like, as George mentioned, this is part of the reason we set up the Incredihire Academy, right? Is to give people, because we are working on an open source project, right? So the intent there is to get people to network together, and also to expose them to the hiring partners that we have with Incredihire.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. GitHub is a great place for that. And it helps recruiters find you as well. They're putting their Boolean search terms on Google or whatever AI platform they're scraping the web with. And so it really does help.
I will say, actually, like going back to resumes for a second, the one thing on the resume that's going to put a real smile on my face is a GitHub repo, right? So if like I do this, I will go to the GitHub repo, I will see what the project is. If there is a demo, even better, I will check out the demo. I might even look at a couple commits, right? Just to see, because ultimately, when we're talking about software engineers, nothing speaks louder than code. Nothing. Right. And so at least from a perspective of like understanding their engineering capabilities, of course, there's a huge component of communication and behavioral interviewing and all of that, but I can't do that from a GitHub repo. What I can, or from a resume, right? Like what I can do is kind of get some idea of their technical capabilities. So I will definitely do that. So if you can point to a big famous project you've contributed to in your resume, that's gold.
Yeah, absolutely. That will look good on any resume. Well, Ken, question for you. For the folks that are hiring or looking for work right now, should they consider startups? And what's the most surprising thing you've learned from working at startups?
If you can take the churning, then yes. Startups are actually far more inclined to hire people without all the checkbox of experienced skills. They're going to hire more based on culture, more based on personality, enthusiasm, passion. And you can break through that way by showing it in your application or by a referral. You have an opportunity to show that this matters to you. And especially if you're applying to a startup, that really does matter to you. So as a consequence, my opinion about it is that culture is actually ultimately important for startups. The skills, if you've got some good skills, they should be translatable. If you learn 3 programming languages, could you learn another? Yeah, I think you could. If you've learned how to use certain tools, I'm sure you can figure out the tools that we're using. So it becomes less of a concern on the skill side, more of a concern of, are you going to lift your team up when you are made part of it? Or are you going to do nothing to lift your team up? And so I look for the uplifters. I look for the people who actually bring energy and interest and excitement as a teammate, not just somebody who is, hey, I got to do this. This is part of my career. I'm going to say whatever I need to say in order to get this job.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tell us a little bit more about what makes a good culture fit. Like, what are the things that you look for in a candidate?
So, yeah, what I look for, and I know the guys actually have responses to this too, but specifically is I will look for, you're going to love this, a cover letter. Now, there's a lot of argument about whether they matter or not. my statement about it is, well, who cares? Maybe it doesn't matter 9 times out of 10, but as a startup guy, I can tell you it has made the difference between yes and no. I see a cover letter and it's some AI regurgitated nothing. It's like, all right, well, this guy really wasn't trying very hard. I see another one saying, I've dreamed my whole life of being a part of something like what you are doing right now. I would give my all to be in there. Okay, that's a really big deal. The things that you would put in a cover letter also leak into other parts of your application. Things that you're really excited about may actually stand out on that first page. The specific achievements and impacts that you have made, the ones that you choose to highlight actually show the things that you value. And if your values align with my values in the startup, we've got a good conversation going. So that's where it begins for me.
What are your recommendations for, do you use AI for a cover letter?
Yes, because blank page is brutal. And AI will get you beyond the blank page, but give it a better prompt than, hey, write me a cover letter for this job description. You can go as far as you want with the prompting, and it will actually tailor it more specifically to you and say, look, I'm really passionate about this. Can you make this cover letter show that? It'll do it. It'll do a mediocre job. And then you take it from there and you use your words to amend it, to upgrade it, to make it something much more exciting, to make it more you. And you remove all of the common phrases of, I'd be super excited to, you're going to see that in every cover letter from AI. What good does it do you to have that in yours? None. Actually, it's a negative. So let your personality shine through. If you're going to go to the trouble of having a cover letter and there's a 1 in 10 or a 1 in 100 chance that it might make a difference, then put your heart into it. Better to do that, and then putting 100 applications out in a single day, better to put out 3 great ones. And
100%.
Great, it's got your soul in the cover letters. You've actually thought through the application. You've adjusted your resume to the point where it really matches the job description. If you do that 3 times, you're far more likely to get somebody's notice than if you apply 100 times using AI.
Yeah, 100%. Let your passion actually be articulated, but authentic as well. You can't have passion for 100 different things. You got to really narrow it down and be specific.
Yeah, you're so right. Eugene,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, oh, no, I was just going to say one specific technique around AI that may be worth considering. It's the same technique that's used to generate much better quality content from AI is fine tuning. So not just prompting, but basically what you do is you generate a JSON-L format file that contains prompts and then samples of your writing, right? Of the kind of writing that you do and that showcase your voice. And then you can fine tune the AI model based on that. You will see the quality of any output it generates is going to resemble your voice much, much closer. So there is a big upfront cost, not monetary cost, but just time cost to generate this data set. But the output of it is going to save you hours and hours of time, right? Like depending on how many jobs you're applying for, writing these cover letters, it's going to save you a lot of time.
Do you use anything other than ChatGPT or any specific model recommendations?
No, just 4.0 with fine tuning. I think is plenty good enough. But you probably want to have like 40 to 50 samples in your fine tuning file.
Oh wow, that's actually great advice. I would not have thought that. I probably would have only given it 2. And my ChatGPT is corny. It's pretty corny.
The cool thing is you don't necessarily need to give it 40 or 50 cover letters when you're fine-tuning the model this way. It could be emails you've sent that contain like samples of your voice, right? So or basically the way that you communicate, right? Because you want the cover letter to sound like you. And even when AI generates the cover letter, you're still going to want to go back and potentially finesse it a little bit. It's just the amount of finessing that you're going to have to do will be much, much lower than if you just use prompting.
Yeah, no, that's solid advice and actually very helpful for anybody here. And George, about to move on to you, but any other comments on cover letters here?
Yeah, I was trying to hold back. Does anyone read cover letters anymore? Yeah, so you're the one, Ken. You and that one other person read. I've never read cover letters from applicants. I've never even been given cover letters. And I got to say, when I was applying before, I've gone through the process of customizing cover letters or having generic ones and applying. I've never got any responses from any of those applications. I'm just a sample set of one, so maybe it's just me, but I haven't seen it be very effective. And I understand when companies are trying to filter candidates and they want ones who are really passionate about their job, and so they're looking for ones who can generate cover letters, and I get it. But I also got to say, oftentimes the best candidates are ones who are busy at their own work, doing an amazing job, delivering, and super busy with their lives and don't have time to customize cover letters for every application. And I know it's hard to pick out. I know you have to use some criteria. I think it's just kind of hit and miss. So I've done it for positions where I'm really passionate about. I've also reached out to individuals, and like I mentioned, in the company when um, I think it's a really ideal fit, and I'm really excited about it. I just haven't had that much luck. And the whole ChatGPT thing, Eugene's an amazing writer. I don't know if you guys know this. So his 50 samples are probably just gold. If I gave it 50 samples of my writing, it would tank. I mean, it would just turn the quality down. I do tune, but yeah, I think I get the gist, right? It's like tune it to make it sound more authentic, in the way you talk. The last thing I would say is when I am asked for a statement, I try to give something that's so um, genuine and passionate that I want someone to have some sort of emotional response. So when I've been asked for cover letters, sometimes it's a few words or two sentences, and I would say, I'm going to break anything you give me, and I'll never quit until we ship high quality products to our customers. That's it, right? Like something that says what you'll get if you talk to me, and it makes someone want to talk to me. But again, I haven't had much luck with that.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective and one where, it's one where it depends on the person reviewing the resumes. Everybody is different. Every internal recruiter, every company, every hiring manager. But I would say and just recommend for anybody who's looking for work right now, it is that last 1% that you are doing. Because what we're finding in the job market today is that people are actually just paying AI to apply for them, which is why we're seeing 24 hours maxed out 1,000 candidates. And I would also recommend using AI to apply to jobs. But for those select few where you are personally aligned, like your values, your mission, you've done the work, you'd be a great candidate, go the extra mile. Because right now you do have to do that in order to get noticed. But George, let's stay on you. I did have another question. What's the biggest misconception candidates have about the interview process?
That it's fair. It's not. So I'm a hiring manager. I've done over 1,000 interviews. I try to be extremely objective. When I review resumes, I don't look at the name. I look at impact first. So I try to do everything I can to remove bias, but I'm human. And I am swayed by people who I interview who I think would be a better culture fit, or I agree more with, or you know, if people can make me smile or generate some sort of positive emotion or feeling, I'm biased towards them. And so I've seen a lot of great candidates who don't know how to make that connection interview not get past interviews, even though they're competent. Um, yeah, so you could be the perfect candidate and have everything in order, but if you don't make that connection, um, you won't get through. And knowing that, though, knowing that interviewers are human, you can use that to your advantage. And I don't mean manipulation, I mean making a genuine connection, right? So if you can get in someone's favor, if you can be more human and show your passion and be yourself and that then you'll gain their favor. They'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Like I find myself doing this where candidates that I happen to like more, if they're not giving me a great answer, I'll keep asking them more questions, right? And really find out if, do they really know the right answer or not? But candidates who, again, I'm human, so sometimes I'll find myself saying like, okay, let's just move on, right? And then I go back and I say, was I really fair? Um, so, but when I coach people, like in Incredihire, we do a lot of mock interviews, and practice makes progress, as I say. And so the more that you can practice your storytelling, the more you know the details of behavioral answers that you have, the more it's fluid, genuine, the more you can get to the real impact. You can give the interviewer more of what they're looking for. And there's also a lot of like little tips and tricks of how to make that connection. And it's more than just eye contact. It's how to be confident and relaxed in an interview. And so a few tips I give is first, smile, literally smile. It makes a powerful first impression in that you're coming off in a positive attitude, right? And it sets the tone. Humans also mirror emotion. So like laughter is contagious, smiling is also contagious. So if someone is smiling and it has a positive tone, you tend to have a positive tone. Yes, it's bias, right? But it's positive bias, and that's what you want to have in an interview. So be positive, take control of the narrative, ask questions at first in the interview. If you're given the opportunity, ask the interviewer thoughtful questions, and especially questions that will help you during the interview, like, what are you looking for in this position? I had an interviewer do that once to me. He asked me, I said, how's it going? Do you have any questions? And they said, yeah, what are you looking for? And I told them what I'm looking for. And man, the rest of the interview, that's exactly what the candidate gave me. He gave me like what he's done that satisfies the requirements of my role. And I felt like a little tricked, but at the same time, I was like, that's so clever, right? Because person had a lot of experience. They could have probably answered the same question three different ways. They answered it in the way that what I was looking for. And it gave them the best possible chance of getting through that. So interviews aren't fair. There's bias because humans are biased, but there's ways to get through that and let your genuine self come through. And if you still don't get it, then it's not the right role for you, right? Don't be someone else. Don't try to trick or manipulate to get a job that you're not going to be successful in or that you don't want. So I think that's the biggest misconception.
Yeah, love that tip. Just smile going into it. It helps alleviate so much anxiety. And we all know interviewing can be stressful, but smiling, it tricks your brain and it definitely works.
Yeah.
Awesome. Ken, fun question for you. What's the wildest thing someone has tried to do to stand out in an interview? And did it work?
Yes, it worked. Yeah, I was talking to the guys about this the other day. A candidate showed up on a video conference wearing the full regalia of the United States Winter Olympics team. Had the whole uniform on and had the skis right there with him. And I'm not quite sure why he did that. He said he was on his way to practice. He was a ski jumper, He'd actually been in 3 Olympics leading up to that moment. And turns out he's actually been in 4 now, and he's trying for his 5th, which is super rare. That doesn't happen. But it gave us a hook. We could talk, we could chat. I'm like, what are you doing? You didn't wear a tie for me. You brought your uniform, and it started out in a way that actually was really appealing. We could have a human conversation. So, I'm not sure I'd recommend putting on a uniform, but find ways to break it into something more personal, which is getting back to what George was saying. I think a key of all that is the questions, not just about the company, but never answer a question until you're really sure what your answer is going to be. There's an infinite number of ways that you can respond to a question in an interview. But if you don't have all the details clear, then you're going to say something that's probably a little off the mark. So ask questions. All right, so when you say this, are you talking about in the abstract, or should I get very specific with the math? Go ahead and ask those questions and make a conversation out of this before you dive into your responses. I see a hand up, George.
Yeah, I want to say a quick story. So that I didn't actually experience this, but when I was at Amazon, I was told about this particular interviewer who, in their interview, talked about how they were in the World Trade Center during 9/11, and they actually carried someone out of the building and saved their life. But they said the same story to every interviewer on the loop. And they only realized this when they came together to come to a consensus. And they realized that while this was extremely impactful story, very emotional, really resonated with all of them, it was really the only thing that that candidate had. And I think it's a double-edged sword there, that you have an advantage, use it, but don't abuse it. So I think there's ways to be genuine without trying to be manipulative, and show your passion and your real self come through. But you also have to demonstrate how you're going to be an amazing, productive employee, right? How are you going to deliver, make a business impact? And interviewing is also a two-way street. So you're being interviewed, but you're also interviewing the company, right? You want to see if it's a good fit. So Dana, I had a question for you. What are some red flags that candidates should look for during the interview process that might make them decide that this isn't where they want to work?
Vague expectations. If you ask a question, what is expected of me, or what are you looking for? And you get, I want you to code Java, C++, C Sharp, Node, and Angular, and also like that's a lot. And as a recruiter, whenever I work with a hiring manager and they're asking for everything under the sun, I know, A, this is probably going to be a really hard job, and somebody's really going to hate it. But if you're not getting a good, strong answer, like, hey, you're going to be working on this feature and it's going to be impactful because XYZ, and I really need you to do vanilla JavaScript. If you're not getting that clear-cut answer, it's a red flag. But
I would say there is an interesting corollary to that for managers. If you're interviewing as a manager and you're being told, you're going to be coding for 50% of your time and managing people for 50% of your time, run. Or vice versa, if you're interviewing for SDE and your manager is coding half of their time, run. That basically means you're not going to get the time from your manager that you need.
Yeah, so interesting. I feel like it's a requirement to get a FANG job today, though.
Yeah.
But Dana, I noticed there's a question in Q&A about the ATS, right? So kind of how to get through ATS systems to a real recruiter. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I really like this question, actually, because AI is just mixing things up. everywhere, in every job and part of this process. So the question is, how do you balance optimizing a resume for an ATS system? And how should you focus on building or fine-tuning a resume for personal referrals, or, how do you even manage that whole process? It's interesting because AI it's still newer in terms of people are using it for their resumes, and that can actually be a detriment to you if you don't go in and make sure to fine tune that it still sounds like you. Because what's going to happen is you're just going to get automatically rejected. Because AI is going to say, oh, this was written with AI, and we don't actually think this is a real person. So what I would do is make sure to write it yourself. But the most important things that we've kind of hinted on today is make sure it reads what impact you had. Resumes should always have how you did the role, where you did it, when you did it, and what was the impact, like the business impact. And I know that might be hard to calculate, but if you can just get rough numbers there, like 3x, Eugene, your profile is awesome with that. So yeah, any tips from there?
Yeah, what I found often when I was trying to construct my resume is like, my current job, I'm actually an SDM of a advertising team. So figuring out what my revenue impact is very easy. But how do you do this when when I had a job working as a Windows architect in Adobe? Like, how do you figure out the impact? Well, you fudge, right? Like you take your best educated guess, and you kind of put that on. I mean, it has to be supportable, right? Like if I were to say that I made an extra $100 million for Adobe, that's probably not going to pass the smell test, right? But if I said that I improved the application performance by whatever 40%, like startup performance or something like that, that definitely is within the realm of possibility, right? So don't out and out lie or make things up, right? Like that's not going to pass the smell test, and sooner or later that's going to bite you, because like especially on fact type things, because companies do background checks and all that, right? But when estimating impact, like an estimate is reasonable, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some other tips I would say is cut the formatting. If you have too much format in your resume, it can actually just be such a challenge for recruiters. All we really care about is the content. Where did you do your last job, and what was your role there, and what was the impact? Ken alluded to the summary, which I actually think is really great as well, to talk about your interests, your passion, and use that as a way to describe what you're looking for. And I think that if you sent that to a personal referral versus an ATS, the only difference is that take that job description, copy and paste it, and say the prompt that you want them to match, and make sure that the language is the same. And what I mean by that is, if they say full stack versus software engineering, you want it to say full stack. Or you want your resume to say Node.js if it's in the resume, instead of just Node. That is very particular, but definitely helpful.
Yep, that makes sense. So one thing that I was curious about is you mentioned that you've been doing agency recruiting. Can you talk a little bit about what the difference is between agency recruiting and internal recruiting?
Yeah, internal recruiters are working for the company itself. They might have 30 to 40 or more positions they're working on at any given time. And then agency recruiters have only like a handful of positions that they're hiring for, that they're trying to quickly move candidates through the process. So the difference too, and I would say agency recruiters will reach out to candidates and they have specific qualifications that they're looking for. And then internal recruiters usually will go through who has posted on the job. And a trick there too is to post to the company's website, not on LinkedIn, because they're going to their applicant, their database first. A lot of times they don't even reach LinkedIn because they have so many resumes. And they'll go to their internal database first. So that's a little different approach from both sides.
Yeah, that makes sense. Going back to our QA really quick. So David has a question about, do you recommend customizing your resume for each job application? I think we've sort of answered that, but maybe just to reiterate really quick.
Absolutely. Right now, it is a challenging market. It is not a candidate's market right now. So you have to do the little things that will get you over the edge. And hopefully you use, Eugene, your advice and train your ChatGPT so that you can optimize that process.
Yeah, makes sense. There's a question also from Dinesh over here about, so he is a experienced professional in QA. He went through an interview loop and actually a couple loops, it looks like, where basically he got to the end, looked like everything was positive, and then he got a rejection. So George, since you're director of QA, like, do you maybe want to talk about that a bit? Like, what could have possibly gone wrong?
So many things could have gone wrong. It's hard to tell exactly what could have gone wrong. Could have been another candidate that they liked more during the interview process. It could have been maybe didn't give the answers in the right format, or they didn't get the impact that they were looking for. Good companies who take hiring seriously, every interviewer has a skill or category characteristics that they're interviewing for, and they need to get enough signal to be able to say yes or no. And so maybe that wasn't something that the interviewer really understood or was able to communicate. So many things, I think, in quality as in development, there's some core skills you have to absolutely have and demonstrate. So everyone I interview, every single person, I ask a testing question. If you can't test, you're not getting the job. Doesn't matter what else you could do. So there's kind of some fundamental things. And then there's the formula. You really have to know what kind of question you're going to get, how to answer it, and what format you need to give. Interviewers take a lot of notes. And if you give me an answer that I can fit in the format of my notes and it's concise and impactful, it's going to be great use of time because I don't have to ask follow-up questions. I don't have to go back through my notes and add stuff if you didn't give me the right context in the beginning. And it just makes the time go so much faster. And then you have time to ask questions, to elaborate. And so again, like these are things that we go through when we do mock interviews, interview prep, resume prep, is we go through a lot of these scenarios and we say, how would you handle this situation? And you answer, and then we give you feedback and we say, okay, but you could have done this better and that better. And to really get your best self out there and communicate your full potential. So sorry for the vague answer, but it's, so much could have gone into this. And I know it's frustrating. I've been as well where I finished the last interview and I'm like, whew, that was great. Right. So
Yeah, and I will just augment it really quick, like with a real life story. I was just recently hiring for a spot on my team at IMDb, and I had gone through 3 candidates, and I had an offer out to one candidate, or at least I was getting very close to making the offer. And then I went and interviewed an external candidate who came in through our sourcing, and this guy was so awesome that after the interview, I connected with him on LinkedIn, and we started just chatting. Like I liked him so much, and he liked me. Like we just instant bond. The problem was I already had like this offer that I was going to make to another candidate, and so I couldn't rescind the offer. Right? Um, I wanted to hire this guy. I wanted to hire this guy more than I wanted to hire the other guy, but I already made the offer. I'm not going to, screw somebody over just because I wanted a different candidate. So ultimately, I had to tell him, sorry, we're going to have to go in a different direction. So, just because you get a rejection, it does not necessarily mean that you did something wrong, that your answers weren't up to snuff. There could have been things going on in the background that were absolutely out of your control. The other really quick concept that's worth mentioning is Scott Hanselman made up this concept called the interview anti-loop, which is basically an interview loop that you cannot possibly pass, no matter how smart, good, experienced, skilled, and so on you are. You just cannot, because basically you are not connecting with the interviewers on a personal human level, like personality questions, right? So it doesn't matter how good your answers are, you would not have passed that loop. So sometimes, like for me personally, when I get a rejection, I'm like, oh, that must have been the antelope. Which, at least psychologically helps a little bit. But yes, Dinesh, I definitely hear the frustration. It is painful. And sometimes there is nothing you can do, right? Like in terms of getting shortlisted, it's just when you happen to get into the pipeline, right? And if there was somebody there before you.
It's better than not getting shortlisted. But I'll
Yeah.
add too that I've been hearing from recruiters that there's a lot of selection toward FANG and MANG companies. That if there's two candidates who are more or less equal and someone has Amazon on their resume, easy choice. And that's actually a problem for me since all I've got are startups. In a way, it seems like sometimes the people who are working at those companies are just going from job to job to job and taking the openings that way. And that's frustrating too. But anyway, we're at the 0 hour.
Let's do one last question from Kelly since it's been sitting there for a little bit. Just answering it really quick about do you give skill levels or just mention the top skills? If you mean at the resume level, what I've seen is probably just mentioning the skills is good enough. Right? You don't necessarily have to say 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, or whatever. If you're talking in the interview, hopefully your answers themselves showcase this skill, and you don't have to say that you're an expert or not. Just the way that you talk about the technology will show your expertise. George.
Yeah, to add to that, so I think skill levels best demonstrated in what you did with that skill. So again, it goes back to impact in a resume. So you can have the keywords, but it doesn't really tell me what you did with it, what you delivered, right? So I see that in QA, SDET resumes all the time where they just list all the different automation frameworks that they had any exposure to. It doesn't tell me what they did, but really good ones are ones that say, I used Playwright. In 3 months, I automated 50 scenarios that reached, 35% test coverage and reduced production bugs by 20%. Very believable numbers, short amount of time. I know what tool you used. Like I know exactly what it takes to do that kind of impact. And that's the person I want to talk to rather than someone who lists 5 automation frameworks, but didn't really tell me what they did with it. So, and also if you list the skill level, it's kind of hard to know if you're really at that skill level or not just by you telling me on a resume.
Okay.
Yeah, I could. Yeah. I brought up Incredihire a few times, and I know we're over our time, but really just want to bring up what we love to do. We love to see great engineers get the jobs that they deserve. I know all of us gives us great personal satisfaction when we can help people do that. And at the Incredihire Academy, we give not only the interview prep and the communication skills that really help you get through the interview process, but also that real world experience. So in the academy, we're there, right? Where we help you through the entire process. In 6 weeks, you ship a feature, you work with others, you got to collaborate and deliver something just like you would at a main company. We all have minimum 20 years experience. The white hair shows that I've been in the industry for a while. But during the 6 weeks, you get the experience, you get the coaching from us. We do one-on-ones, we do group and individual mock interviews at least 3 times a week. And we partner with hiring companies and we try to, play the matchmaker. I don't know, we're the Bumble of hiring. I don't think that's the right way of saying it, but
That's a good slogan. I like it.
we try to match openings that we've partnered with companies with candidates. And we're not, 100 resumes on a pile of yet another hiring manager, but we try to really break through that noise and let candidates shine given their skills and capabilities. And when you get hired, we don't leave you there. We give you 90 days of post-hired career mentoring. So all this, it's for a flat fee for $1,500. We're accepting applications now. You can apply and do the application interview, because we interview everyone before they join the academy. On Incredihire.com, you can sign up and apply.
Thanks, George. Thank you, everyone. And again, thank you to our attendees for spending some of their Sunday with us. We hope that this webinar has been educational. It's been a fun discussion for us. So thank you all. Go back to Incredihire to the upcoming webinars section. You should see the next webinar appear within the next couple of days, and hope to see you at the next one.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Dana, for facilitating this.
Thanks for
Thank you,
having
Dana.
me. Best of luck, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.